transparency and accountability are pillars of how to exit a consent decree, and these last minute maneuvers undermine work done over a decade to achieve constitutional policing in the city of New Orleans. And I will go on a limb and say we said all of that yesterday on the show.
That's absolutely correct. I
Hmm.
mean, you and I are not lawyers, but we can read.
Yeah.
And I am a little familiar with the charter. I have a little bit of experience in dealing with past dealings with outside counsel, whether they're pro bono or hired or not. And you're absolutely correct. And then, yesterday, I talked about the benefits of getting out of the consent decree, especially when you talk about the money, them explaining what compliance is and what areas of compliance. But our legal counsel has advised us, and I mentioned yesterday that is hiring outside counsel is the role of the AG. Is that in compliance with our home rule charter? And it seems as though it isn't. So even if someone was for entering into this last phase, the last 2-year phase, then why not make sure we're consistent but not violating the process, but making sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted?
And I
You
want to
know, we did a great job of explaining what was actually in the letter. Thank you for helping me write it.
Yeah, and the thing about it too, I want to give a shout out to the New Orleans United Front and Belden Baptiste as well, because
Hmm.
part of our conversation also included their letter that also
Correct.
said some of the same things that now the council is saying as a reason why we shouldn't just hastily jump out of something when you don't have any concrete proof, evidence, anything to show us that we're moving in that direction as you're so boldly stating. Because again, there was a lot of ly words used, mostly, in terms of what they are considering a
Yeah.
success. And again,
Partially,
absolutely,
mostly.
and
Yeah.
there are non-negotiables that I feel we can't
Hmm.
mostly or partially do if we're
Hmm.
talking about the safety of our residents and our visitors alike. And so I made sure to put the people who live here first, because to me that is the most important demographic. That's the most important infrastructure piece is people. And to me, if we
Hmm.
can't get the people part right, then all the other infrastructure, the roads and the bridges and the blight, none of that to me matters, because who's going to be here to see the nice streets and the nice buildings, in the nice neighborhoods, if we run all of our people away from a place that they don't feel safe. So
Yeah, well, and I think one of the good things we did yesterday was we want to make sure that the police help us be safe, that they protect and serve. But when you feel safe, I think we clearly define you want to make sure that we're safe from law enforcement too,
yeah.
and that it's not overzealous, overburdening, and discriminatory. So yeah, and I want to shout out to. Mr. Baptiste. Him and
Yes.
I had the conversation the day before. We even talked about it to at least talk about his concerns and the concerns of the United Front. And it seems like, based on those concerns, I think we've asked the city to proceed with caution, but also be in compliance. So we'll see what happens next.
And I got a piece that I want to play, and I want your feedback on it. And listen, if
Hmm.
you're listening, the number here is 504-582-9422, because I believe that decisions like this play into a larger agenda of a takeover. And you and I have been talking about that on this show for quite some time. I know I have been pushing this idea that we are sitting blindly at the wheel, and folk are making
Uh,
strategic plans to take over our city. And
yeah,
and for
yeah.
me, I want you to hear what this guy out of Texas said on the floor of the House. And I want you to imagine, anybody listening, I want you to imagine that it's not taking place in Texas, that it is anywhere USA. As a matter of fact, it could be USA, because that same agenda is happening on the national level. So
Hmm.
as soon as our super producer gets it keyed up, I want you to hear this, because when I listen to it, and shout out to my soror, Inez Pierre, she shot it to me last night so that I can hear it. And I saw it this morning. That's why I'm saying last night, because when I woke up, it was already on my phone. So I don't know what time she sent it to me, but the moment I opened my eyes, I clicked it and I listened to it, and I said, everybody has to hear this. So take a listen, OT, and
Well,
let's talk about it.
Yeah, let me further set the table while he cues it up. The Governor Landry to bus New Orleans homeless out of state or to temporary shelter.
Yeah, that we want to. That's on the back end of the conversation. OT, I want you to listen to that
yeah.
audio.
That's not the governor's decision. That should be our decision.
Absolutely. Listen to that audio. We're going to talk about the governor and all of, watch how it all comes together for us.
There is something happening here in Texas. Here in the state capitol, a small band of Republicans and Democrats in the Texas House are coming together to stop two West Texas billionaires from taking over our state government. Their names are Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilks, and they're the biggest Republican donors in the state. They've already bought our governor, they bought our lieutenant governor, they bought our attorney general, they bought our state senate. And now, to complete their takeover, they're trying to buy the Texas House. Tomorrow, they'll attempt to get one of their puppets elected speaker. One of our Republican colleagues said, quote, "This is the most corrupt state government in Texas history." Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilks are not just oil and gas oligarchs. They're also Christian nationalist pastors. They've spent more than $100 million to ban abortion in Texas, to ban books in Texas, and now they're trying to close our Texas public schools with a private school voucher scam. This is bigger than party. This is bigger than partisanship. Texas is too big and too great to be sold to the highest bidder. We cannot allow two billionaires to transform our beloved state into a theocracy. We have to stop them.
OT, when I listened to that, I literally imagined that is happening here, that is happening on our state level, that is happening all across this country.
All across this
all
country.
across this country. So yes,
Yeah.
it happened on the House floor in Texas, but imagine that is anywhere USA. That is USA right now.
We don't have to imagine. And first of all, thank you for that. I'll tell people, whether we're in studio together or on the phone, our spirits and our minds are aligned in terms is where we go with the conversation and where it winds up. I was actually going to talk about the piece, and I was hoping that we would. I don't know why I hope, because we're always spiritually connected to the information that we deal with. But it's not. We don't have to imagine that it's happening. The table was set some time ago, and the problem is that legislatures were complicit, both Democrat and Republican.
Yes.
Decades ago, when you talked about gerrymandering, creating super districts that didn't create competition, right? Republicans were extremely strategic in making sure that they targeted the South and Texas and state houses, so that no matter what the demographic was, they could control the agenda or what was their conservative agenda. So now we see it playing out. And now in Texas, many Republicans are disturbed, and there are moderate Republicans throughout the South or below the Mason-Dixie line who haven't spoken up yet, but they're giving away their power, in many cases, to this extreme agendas that have nothing to do with party, but have a lot to do with power and control. And we see that playing out here. Now, I'm not, as we talked about yesterday, my personality is always to work with people if you can and when you can. But how do you come into my house, tell me what I'm going to do with my city, with my people, with my visitors, or even in many cases with my homeless? No, you need to get on my bus and my train, and we'll talk about how I'm going to handle it and how you're going to support me handling it, not roll over and let you take over.
I'm just hoping that that the sentiments of the guy that was speaking in that clip resonates with everybody across this country, because there are more of us than there are of the billionaire interests, right? Money and power, we do know crowns the king, but the folk are the people who actually go in the voting booth and vote. The regular, everyday 9 to 5 working individual makes up the majority of what this country represents. And I just don't understand how most of us are sitting idly by while billionaires are buying their way into the most powerful corners of
Well,
our government.
well, I do. I understand why. We've evolved to a place in a space that Democrat, Republican, moderate, and maybe some even independents, right? Where the title of political, of being part of the club, of being in the store is enough. Not the mission, not the platform, and not the cause. But you said earlier, it is nothing new. So let's talk as a historian, as someone who was encouraged to read Jim Singleton, Dorothy May Taylor, even the late Joe Giarrusso. He always encouraged us to study history, right? These movements weren't new. When there were ethnic groups who came to power, many of them came to power on platforms to advocate for the communities that they came from. Poor Irish, poor Italians, women, African Americans. But then, Dr. Wyatt, and you'll understand this as a historian and as someone who's read literature, once they got in the room, they were enticed with the benefits. Once they got in the room, they said, well, look, now that you're in the room, you can be part of our club, but never officially being part of the club. And so what we're seeing now is that elected officials, whether they're Republican, Democrat, or otherwise, male or female, black or white, Asian or Hispanic or otherwise, they've yielded their concerns and their platforms for their communities just to be part of the club. That's what we're seeing right now, again, revisited.
It is so disheartening. And I know you made the comment about what the governor's plans are in terms of this strategy on homelessness. And I think it goes perfectly to this idea of the topic we're talking about. How do you come here and just start to dictate to us what happens here? Is our council not in place for a reason? Do we not have a mayor for a reason? Do we not have all of these elected officials in our very city that don't have a say or any buy-in into what happens? But it is my understanding that there's some elected officials that are championing this move, which further baffles me, because the statement that I read tells you what this is about. He said, the governor, when I assumed office, I made a commitment to take on difficult issues. Rampant homelessness has been a long-standing challenge for Orleans Parish, and I refuse to continue ineffective and costly policies. With the recent ISIS terrorist attack, the December 8th fire under I-10, frigid temperatures, and the destruction of the riverfront streetcar line, it is in the best interest of every citizen's safety and security to give the unhoused humane and safe shelter as we begin to welcome the world to the city of New Orleans for Super Bowl 59 and Mardi Gras.
Well,
I know what I heard.
Well, let me say this again. You started off earlier by saying that is nothing new. Every time there's an event, mayors and councils and business leaders came together, whether you agreed with it or not, to determine what we were going to do with the homeless, right? What we're going to do with those people in their faces while they interacted with the Super Bowl, an NCAA event, or a major event. But the difference was, Dr. Wyatt, that decision didn't come from Baton Rouge. That decision was made in New Orleans. Every other mayor that has managed a Super Bowl, and we talked about it here before. We talked about it and said, "Oh wow, man, why y'all just wait to clean up downtown or find a place for the homeless for a major event or when Super Bowl comes?" But the difference was that wasn't dictated from Baton Rouge. It wasn't dictated from outside of our boundaries. We did that together, or those decisions were made inside Orleans Parish and inside the Orleans Parish Home Rule Charter.
Well, listen, we have to go to break. Can you stay with us a little bit longer?
Yeah.
So listen, we have to go to
Absolutely.
break, but we want to dive into that and a whole lot more on the other side.
Absolutely.
This is WBOK 1230 AM, what New
What
Orleans
New Orleans
is
is talking about. Who say?
Our station.
Hey everybody, it's Graylin Bryant Banks.
And Kimber White Dupree.
From the front porch, y'all. You know how we do. Every Monday is Moving Monday.
And Tuesday is Trivia Tuesday.
And y'all know we have nothing but bad cheering coming through here on Wednesday.
But stick with us. On Thursday, we travel.
That's right. And Friday's Free Your Mind Friday, so get your brass up.
Something on your mind? Want to get it off your chest?
Holla at your people. WBOK 1230 AM, the station you listen to.
All day long. NOLA Public Schools' main round enrollment for kindergarten through 12th grade is now open. With 73 schools available through the NOLA Public Schools Common Application Process, or NCAP, finding the right school fit for your family is easier than ever. List up to 12 choices to maximize your chances and apply by January 24th. We're all in, and we hope you are too. Apply today at enrollnolaps.com. That's enrollnolaps.com.
Our military faces a crisis. Recruitment down, morale weak. Our leaders more focused on going woke than killing terrorists and defending America. President Trump nominated Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense to change things. Hegseth isn't an insider or a swamp dweller. He's a decorated veteran of the United States Army who deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. And he's exactly who we need leading the Department of Defense. Hegseth will ban woke nonsense from our armed forces, strengthen our military, and make our soldiers proud to serve. Call your United States Senator at 202-224-3121. Tell them stand with Trump. Confirm Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense. Again, call your senator at 202-224-3121. Tell them to vote to confirm Pete Hegseth and make our military great again. Paid for by American Leadership PAC.
Visit DePaul's new Algiers Health Center at 2801 General de Gaulle Drive to receive primary and preventive care for both adults and children. Services also include behavioral health, imaging, and on-site pharmacy, vision, Medicaid enrollment assistance, and more. For appointments, visit DePaulCommunityHealthCenters.org or call 504-207-3060.
Making a difference in the community. WBOK 1230 AM.
Good morning, wake up.
The Good Morning Show.
Good morning.
On WBOK 1230 AM.
And we are back. Welcome back to the Good Morning Show. I am your host, Dr. Ashanta Wyatt. On the line with us is my co-host, Oliver O.T. Thomas. And behind the glass, holding us all together, is super producer, Nyron Sanders. Also on the line joining us this morning is Dr. Ferdinand. He's going to be here talking to us about all of these health disparities, particularly in the minority communities and the high-risk populations, especially African-American communities. So welcome to the Good Morning Show, Dr. Ferdinand. How are you this morning?
Good morning. Can you hear me well?
I can.
Yeah, we can hear you well, Dr. Ferdinand, as always. Man, thank you for your service. As a matter of fact, Dr. Weiner, we were talking about Dr. Ferdinand with another health expert not too long ago, and they were trying to tell us what we already knew about your family's history
Yes.
with heart, especially in the Ninth Ward. And I can rattle off a whole list of my family members, including my mom and aunt and grandma and others who you treated. But before we get into it, I would not like to put you in back in the corner, but if you listen to the conversation about what the governor is planning to do with our homeless, that's more than just homeless. That's also health related. Anyone who knows you knows that from health from A to Z, you've been involved, especially with wellness and protecting our community. Just moving the homeless is one thing, but Dr. Ferdinand, aren't there health concerns there when you talk about displacing or moving folk from one place to another? It's not just about moving the body. There are a lot of other things that ought to be considered. Should correct?
Sure, that all comes into play. You mentioned disparities when you were having your conversation prior to this break. And homelessness is a risk factor for having infections, influenza, COVID, pneumonia, but it's also a risk for having heart attacks and strokes because many times they'll have elevated blood pressure, not know it, no one's checking them. So when we move people around like checkerboard, we need to make sure that they're also getting evaluated, that they're getting appropriate treatment and follow-up. We do have fairly qualified health centers that are available. We know that with the closing of Big Charity University is a great institution, but you don't have that safety net where a person can just show up and get care. Large numbers of our persons are uninsured or underinsured. I used to bus tables down at the Rouse Augusta Desire Oyster Bar, and it was minimum wage and all you could steal. Many times there was no insurance. There was no time off. So we are a service community. I guess that's good. People love our hospitality. So we have a lot more to do to try to eliminate these disparities.
So Dr. Ferdinand, you've dedicated much of your career to addressing these health disparities, particularly in our communities. How do you see do you see an exacerbation of these disparities in terms of the added level of the trauma and the stress that comes with maneuvering in a city that has like high blood pressure rates, high diabetes rates because of our food and our way of life? Do you see these disparities exacerbating themselves?
Well, absolutely. Now, remember, we do need to talk about influenza vaccinations, and we'll get to that. But let me answer your question directly. There is in the national data, if you look at heart attacks and strokes, they're higher down in the South and the Southeast. It's good for football, but it's bad for heart disease.
Yes.
And there's several reasons. One is I already talked about the high levels of underinsured or not insured, the service industry, where you have a, quote, job, but it really doesn't have any benefits. The other reason, quite frankly, is the history of bias. If you go back prior to the Civil Rights Institution, and I'd say after Civil Rights, there really was bias in the healthcare where it was hard for black people to get access to care. And the Charity Hospital safety net, I trained at Charity Hospital, was important, but it was difficult just on a regular basis to get a doctor. And we know after Katrina, many of the private doctors, especially the middle-aged and older doctors, didn't come back or they retired. So we really are having problems. I look at the fires in California, the first thing I think about is it's going to take them decades because to a large extent we have not recovered from August 29th, 2005.
Absolutely. So how do you see the influenza vaccination intersecting with these issues, these health and high-risk issues already?
Yeah, great point, Don.
It fits directly. The governor and the Surgeon General have mandated no further public health interventions for vaccination. So the vaccine campaigns that we've been doing for years are not going to come from the state government. We have to do them locally. That's why we have Flu Ready NOLA. Now, our own health director, Jennifer Avegno, who's an emergency physician, and the director of health, the CEO of New Orleans East Hospital, which is a community hospital, by the way, Takesha Davis, they partner with us, the Healthy Heart Community Prevention Project that's run by my wife, Daphne Ferdinand. She's a PhD in nursing. And for years, we have been telling our community that this idea that vaccination is bad and you shouldn't get vaccinated is really not true. And we know for some time, because of a lot of bias in the healthcare system and frankly, Tuskegee, where the healthcare system didn't do the right thing, black people were suspicious. But we now have the highest rates of influenza here in Louisiana. There are also higher rates in other states, but we're perhaps the highest rates. The state government has walked away from community prevention. So Flu Ready NOLA is the Healthy Heart Community Prevention Project. Takesha Davis at New Orleans East Hospital, Dr. Wagner at the Health Director. We're actually going to push, especially for our black population, get vaccinated. If you're 65 years and older or not, the flu is no joke. Many times patients die from the flu. But it really is for everyone. And this idea that the flu vaccine is going to give you the flu is just not true. You will sometimes get achy. You might feel a little tired after you get a vaccination. That's because the body is starting to engage with the flu vaccination. One more history thing. If you look back at February 20th, 2020, there was Mardi Gras in New Orleans. After Mardi Gras, about 3 weeks later, COVID hit us. Why? Because we had people that came in from all over the world to enjoy our great city. And I was down in Treme. I remember dapping out people who subsequently died, and I tried to figure out how close did I get to them. New Orleans, Seattle, New York City were the three epicenters of COVID-19. The point that I'm making is Mardi Gras coming, Super Bowl's coming. People are going to be coming in bringing viruses from all over the world. I think if we're going to serve them, if we're going to rub shoulders, if we're going to catch beads, we're going to dance for them, we're going to clean tables when they're eating in the restaurants, we should be vaccinated against influenza and COVID-19.
So when it comes to this bias outside of our community and the suspicion inside of our community, what do you think are the biggest barriers to the influenza vaccine uptake in vulnerable or underserved populations, and how can these barriers be overcome?
Well, at first it was related to the history of Black patients not getting the appropriate care and just not really believing that much in medicine. Many times we have what's called health-seeking behavior, where you actually go and look for it. Well, we don't have that. When do you go to the doctor? When you're sick. When are you sick? When you're having bad chest pain, that's a heart attack. When you can't move your mouth, you slur your speech, or you have blurred vision, that's a stroke. When you can't breathe because you have fluid in your heart, that's a heart failure. When your toe turns black from gangrene, that's diabetes. When you can't urinate, that's end-stage renal disease, dialysis. But that really is not the way to seek care. You should seek care to try to prevent these conditions. And that's why I'm a cardiologist, so I deal with heart disease and stroke. But on the other hand, I know that the same people who have heart disease and stroke are the patients who die from influenza. So that's why I embrace, along with the Healthy Heart Community Prevention Project, New Orleans East Hospital, and the health department, I embrace public health outreach for vaccination. And it's one of the things that we did to get our hands on the COVID-19. It didn't mysteriously go away. A lot of people died. A lot of people got it and got some natural immunity, but they died or got sick in the process. And then people got an uptick in vaccine. We had the COVID-19 outreach, and the Black population went from last to first. That's what happened to COVID. Now, some of you are old enough, and if you're not old enough, ask your grandma or your grandpa about this. Polio used to cripple kids. Kids would disappear from school and show up several months later with a withered leg and a big metal brace on. They were old telethons with people in iron lungs to breathe. Polio's going to come back. That's a virus. If we don't really embrace modern science, these viruses don't go away. They kind of hide and they duck and dodge like a fighter. But if you don't do the right thing, they're going to come out swinging. So mumps, measles, polio, influenza, all of these viruses are going to come back if we embrace this nonsense that vaccinations are bad.
And Doc, I want to say that because what you do know is I'm old enough to remember the neighborhood clinics, the neighborhood doctors, not just you, Ferdinand, but all of the other doctors on Captain Avenue, Dr. Carter, the clinic on Caffin and Claiborne, and
Model cities. It started as model cities.
Yeah, and one or two other spots, and my cousin's drugstore on Henry on Caffin and Galvez. But while you were giving the history, we're hearing very few conversations about, we hear about food deserts and technology deserts and cable deserts, but we don't hear anything about the medical deserts now that are created in our community. You spoke to that a couple of years ago on the show when you were talking about vaccines in COVID. But it seems to be, especially when we talk about chronic illnesses and the resurgence of diseases that first of all cripple disadvantaged communities first. Talk about that aspect of it again with influenza and other diseases coming back and maybe morphing into something more stronger. How concerned should we be?
We really should be concerned. I have patients right now who are on ventilators with viral pneumonia. Pneumonia can be from a bacteria like Streptococcus, and you give a person penicillin, the antibiotics help. But it's difficult to treat viruses because they're not going to respond to antibiotics. What vaccination does, it doesn't give you the virus. It's a killed virus. The virus is not active, and you may have, like I said, an ache in your arm. You might get a little sore, a little tired. But it tells the immune system, hey, look, if you see this thing come back, kill it. And then that protects you from having serious illness when the active virus comes into play. So Flu Ready NOLA and the collaboration between Healthy Heart Community Prevention Project, New Orleans East Hospital, and the City Health Department is trying to say, hey, we're in New Orleans. We already have high rates of influenza right now. Look it up, Google it, whatever you got to do. Go to wherever source. We're at high rates of influenza right now. And I'm telling you, I know what happened with the COVID-19 because I lived it. And what happened was we had Mardi Gras, and about 3 weeks later in March, we were one of the epicenters of COVID-19 because people came in from all over the world. Well, they're coming again. We deal with crowds. It's a small city, but we blow up to 300,000-400,000 people come in. And when that happens is you don't know what they're bringing. I say we all should be very suspicious of if we're working, especially in the service industry, making sure that we have ourselves with appropriate vaccination. That also goes with people who deal with education, kids, because kids oftentimes may not manifest symptoms, but they come to school, a little cough, a little sneeze, next thing you know, the teacher's very sick. So these are some reasons, large crowds dealing with children, these are some reasons I urge everyone in the community to get vaccinated against the flu. The vaccine is readily available. You can check with New Orleans East Hospital, some of the community centers that we have. We actually don't have enough physicians out in the community. I couldn't rebuild Heartbeats Life Center after Hurricane Katrina. I'm over at Tulane now. And quite frankly, we don't have enough doctors out in the community as we did prior to Katrina. So I know what's going to happen in Los Angeles. It's going to take them time to rebuild. But we do have tools that are available to protect ourselves. Flu-ready NOLA influenza vaccine is one of those tools. Just one. That's not a solution to all our health crises, but it's part of the solution.
So as an advocate for public health, what role do you believe healthcare systems and policymakers should play in improving access to the influenza vaccine for people with chronic conditions like hypertension and diabetes?
Well, that's a tough one. I told you the state actually, and again, look it up. Your guys can talk about it offline. They actually made a mandate that they're not going to do public health outreach. They have a lot of anti-vax stuff going on with our state public health. So that's a barrier. We don't have as many private physicians and clinics as we did prior to Katrina. In fact, we have very little now. But you should try to reach out to the community health centers that we have, or if you have a private doctor, reach out to him or her and ask them about getting vaccinated. It's going to be hard for us going forward. I think the big integrated health systems do have a responsibility not just to have profit from hospitalization and doing procedures, but doing more community medicine. And we'll try as much as we can to work with them. New Orleans East Hospital is a community hospital, but it's not something that I think is embraced as widely as I would like to see by some of the big integrated health systems.
Go ahead, Dr. White.
No, I'm sorry, OT. And I think what compounds that, Dr. Ferdinand, is the culture and socioeconomic factors that influence vaccine acceptance. So you have this idea on, like, for legislation that is not as important because you have this anti-vax talk, but you also have communities of people who don't believe in the necessity of a vaccine. So how does that compound the issue that you're going to have in terms of making certain that people understand the importance of the influenza vaccination?
Yeah, I don't blame people at all for some of the hesitation because there has been, as I mentioned, bias in the healthcare system. I teach medical students, and I often give them the history of bias that physicians actually were supportive of some of the bias. But that being said, if you go to a valid site, CDC, NIH, one of the .gov sites, or one of the .edu sites, which is an educational site, you'll see the numbers. Influenza is high in Louisiana. We have death and disability from not only influenza, but a whole host of diseases. Vaccines help, and vaccines help. And I direct my patients and I direct the community to go to places that you can trust, not trying to sell you something, and get the information for yourself or talk to your own private clinician or the clinic that's near you. We have a Healthy Heart CCP, stands for Community Prevention Project.org. .org means it's a nonprofit. I'm not selling anything. I'm not getting any money for this. You go to healthyheartcpp.org and you get more information about influenza. We also talk about hypertension, blood pressure, diabetes on our website. But wherever you go to a valid source and talk to someone about this. But let's be real about this. We all know people who have gotten sick from these viruses, and it just doesn't make sense with modern medicine to ignore the advances.
Go ahead, OT.
Go ahead, Doctor. Dr. Ferdinand, the National Health Library and the Jameer Public Health Survey, they used some language in their study that says the COVID-19 disrupted how we dealt with influenza and its activity. Yep. And what do they mean by that it disrupted it? So while we were dealing with something else, it actually put us in jeopardy to see this comeback for influenza. Put that in layman's terms for us, please.
So what happened was COVID-19, there was all sorts of theories of where the virus came from. That being said, it was here. It was first in New York, Seattle, and New Orleans. The history in New Orleans was because we had Mardi Gras, and then 3 weeks later in March, we were hit with COVID-19. Once they did develop the vaccines, then there was a whole army of people who were saying that the vaccines were bad. And I looked at the data. I waited till some of the data was proven that it did protect. We didn't have an uptake at first, and then we turned it around. We were able to put our foot on COVID-19. That mistrust with the COVID-19 vaccine has now bled over to all vaccinations, including the flu vaccine. And unfortunately, things that have been proven, like polio. For the young folks in the audience, anybody under 40, I'm telling you, and Oliver, I don't know if you remember, kids would disappear from school and come back with a little skinny leg with big pieces of metal, hunks of metal. They had pelotons with little kids and iron lungs trying to breathe.
Right.
That's a virus. And we were all vaccinated. We had to line up. They gave you either the shot in your arm or a sugar cube with the virus, with the vaccine on it. It went away. Measles, mumps, chickenpox, all those things. You don't see them. So I guess we can talk all that about vaccines because we don't see these diseases. They're going to come back.
So in part of the study, they focus and you've been real keen and when I listen to you talk about the South versus the rest of the United States, especially when you talk about chronic illnesses, right? In the study, it says that typically that the experience of the Southern Hemisphere with that part of the United States served as a reminder that seasonal influenza remains a major public health threat. So what happens differently in the South than the rest of the United States that in the 21st century we're not better prepared? And why is there a regional difference?
You know, we play this red state, blue state game for politics. But when you look at maps, go to a heat map for a large range of diseases, not just influenza, but also for heart disease, hypertension, strokes, diabetes. They're high in the South. Mm-hmm. Now, why is that? The education system is not as well developed as it should. In fact, to some extent, it's going backwards. The public health funding in the South is less. We have a lot of problems, and we have to deal with those problems, infrastructure and streets, et cetera. So maybe we don't have as much money available for public health. And then just the belief systems, which goes along with education. It's easy when people really don't understand the processes of how these diseases manifest themselves. And then I go back to bias. The Southeast Conference is where you had slavery, where black people were not allowed to access care, where you had to go in New Orleans, either charity or you go to Flint Gulch, which has been closed for over 30 years. Turo would allow black patients, but to a large extent, we were locked out of the traditional healthcare delivery system. And charity, when I trained at charity, that was in-staged. I mean, the emergency room at charity is like these emergency rooms you see on television. I was chief resident there for a while, where you had people in stretchers with just a sheet, no rooms, all outlined in the stretchers.
Lined up in the hallway.
The guy come in with a hatchet stuck in the middle of his chest. The next one will come in coughing up blood. I mean, it was chaos. I like big charity. I think it was important, but that's just not the way to treat conditions. Wait until they're in stage, and then a crisis, and then it's chaos. That chaotic approach to medicine is exciting. It makes good television. It's good for the trainees. They get to, quote, see a lot. But the best way is to prevent conditions.
Well, an educator just texted me, Ms. Lewis, Tuskegee was in the South. The Tuskegee.
Tuskegee was in the South. 400 black men were infected with syphilis.
Right.
Syphilis is not a virus. It's called a spirochete. It's a little organism.
Okay.
And at first, there was no knowledge in the 1940s how to treat it. But one of the things that happened with World War II, penicillin was discovered because some of the soldiers were getting infected wounds. And they said, wow, this penicillin stuff kills bacteria. Look, it kills syphilis too. Once they discovered that penicillin killed the syphilis spirochete, then the study continued. But what the study did was just observe. It didn't give the men the penicillin. Bill Clinton had to apologize for what was done by the government with that. But you know, I don't use those historical stories when it's not a story, historical facts to mean that therefore everything doctors say are bad. I think what it means is you need to go to valid sources to get your information. You need to try to have some relationship with a physician or a nurse practitioner or a nurse that you can trust. You go to valid.orgs, .edus, .gov sites, not .com. .com means commercial. You want to go to something like healthyheartcpp.org or New Orleans Health Department or CDC.gov, and that's where you get your information. So when people say they're going to do their research, that doesn't mean you go on Twitter or X or Facebook and just see whatever kind of nonsense is posted. At one point, we need to have a whole conversation about misinformation, because I think what's going to happen is America's going to slide into the abyss, because misinformation is going to be as omnipresent as information. And you see that with the California fires. You don't really know what's up, what's down. People are saying all kinds of crazy stuff. So there's no way for us to know valid information. I'm talking about New Orleans East Hospital, which is a public hospital owned by the city of New Orleans. I'm talking about the City Health Department, which is Dr. Vigno works with you and the City Council. I'm talking about Healthy Heart Community Prevention Project. That's myself and my wife, Daphne. We've been doing this for decades, and we do this as public service. Those are the people. That's the sources you go to. You can't just go on Facebook and see what your cousin down the street thinks about it. I mean, it's just not where you get information.
Yeah, I want to say that because that's extremely important, right? We live in the age of social media, misinformation. We know there's no more fact checking now on social media since Zucker and them went to kiss the ring.
Yeah.
But we grew up hearing about Tuskegee. We grew up hearing about, but what is this thing also about viral warfare, right? Medical warfare. We also hear conspiracy theories about that. What happened in the lab in China, population growth, rich people, Elon Musk and others are going to use disease to deal with population growth. What do we deal with those kinds of rumors that seem to abound, especially on social media now?
Well, I think it's going to be very, very difficult. And I would suggest one of the things you may want to consider with your platform is deal with misinformation and just choose a topic. You can California fires, hurricanes, how hurricanes are made, vaccination. Just pick a topic. Misinformation abounds so much that we really need to try to figure out what's up, what's down. Do I think that the billionaires and the oligarchs are going to use different tools to kill people? No, I don't think so. I think if you have enough misinformation out there and people don't have access to health care, that the Affordable Care Act is either curtailed or revoked. So now you have not only the 10%, now you're 20% of people who don't have insurance. Then that causes death and disability itself. One of the worst things you can have in the United States is to get a serious illness and not have insurance. Why is that? Because, as I mentioned, Big Charity, the safety net is gone, university, whatever the hospitals are, they're going to ask you for money. They're going to send you a bill. And whereas people used to save up money to go to the doctor, hospital bills now, every time you go, 10, 20, 30, 40, 100, 200, 300,000, you can't stuff enough dollars in your mattress to take care of care. So if we don't have universal health care, which I don't think the politicians who are in charge and who are coming in charge are going to protect that, if we don't have universal health care, then you don't have to send a virus or send some toxin into the community. People are going to get sick, and they're going to delay care, as I mentioned before, until the toe is black or they can't breathe, or they can't see, or they can't urinate, and then they're going to be end stage. End stage means that the disease process has now destroyed part of the body process. Then they're going to seek care. They're still going to get a bill, by the way, but they won't be able to prevent death and disability. It's not good. I'm not trying to give you gloom and doom. The statistics are there. One of the worst things you can have is an uninsured status in terms of mobility. The white-black mortality gap is there. Look it up. Look up longevity, white versus black. Just Google it. It's about 10 years for men, 7 to 8 years for women. Black men live shorter lives, and it's not drive-by shooting. Violence is terrible. It's horrible. But that's not the reason. It's heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, kidney disease, the regular stuff. That's what kills most people.
Well, look, we're in the middle of this season. We can all remember as we the COVID and the stories of how it started, especially Mardi Gras. You mentioned New York and Seattle. This weather now is so inconsistent, and the weather patterns. It's not easy to prepare for what type of weather you're going to deal with, and that the body reacts to that. What can we do when we talk about influenza, the fears of polio and other diseases morphing and coming back? What can we begin to do here in New Orleans to protect ourselves? You mentioned New Orleans East Hospital, you and your wife at the program and City Health Department. But how do we begin to prepare for the future, especially given the disparity?
I think we should practice good health habits. One is wash your hands, because believe it or not, you can get viruses not just from everybody sneezing or coughing, but they have the infected virus on their hands, and then they shake hands with you, or they'll give you their plate when you're serving them, or they'll put it on the escalator rail. So you're going up the stairs or going up the escalator, you put your hand there, and then you rub your nose, you get a little itch. So a lot of that comes from washing hands. If you're working in the service industry, if you're working around crowds, if you're a teacher, everybody should. But clearly, if you're in that situation, get vaccinated. This idea that the vaccines are going to cause harm is just not true. You do get some symptoms. I've had the COVID booster, and I've had the influenza. I got nothing. Other members of my family got an ache in their arm. Some got a little tired. Those are reactions that you can expect. But these viruses can kill. I also have patients, as I mentioned when we first started, one who's on a ventilator. So you can't act like this is not a reality. And I bring you back to the polio situation. Those of you who are too young, look up polio, Polio. I remember, I can even remember the names of a couple of the kids. They disappeared from school, and they would show back up with shriveled leg or shriveled arm and a big metal brace, and they would hold telethons. That's coming back. Polio is being found in the wastewater in New York. So there's actually the risk, if we continue this anti-vaccine nonsense, these viruses that used to kill and cripple that we thought we eliminated are going to come back. Again, go to valid sources. You'll see what I'm saying about these viruses. This is not me just coming up with this. This is not a Facebook, something I saw on Twitter. These are studies that are done by public health organizations in big cities like New York.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ferdinand, for joining us this morning, and we appreciate all of the invaluable information that you provided to us. But the takeaway is, do not be afraid to get these vaccines. Vaccines save lives.
That's it. Thank you. And fight against misinformation.
Absolutely, especially when there's a push to not fact check on any of these platforms anymore. So absolutely, fight against misinformation.
We're gonna take your advice and dedicate those shows, and maybe you can recommend some people to deal with some of the misinformation, some of the quack science of the stories that are out there. We like that. I know Nara was listening. I know Dr. White and I were. So how do we, especially because of the lack of fact checking, how do we begin to deal with that when stories come out on the internet or abound that are not true? Thank you for that recommendation.
All right,
thank you so much, Doc.
Thank you for giving the platform to the people.
Have a great rest of your morning. Listen,
well,
the conversation was much needed, and I appreciate Dr. Ferdinand for availing himself to us and talking about how to work through what you're reading and what you're hearing and how do you process those things. On the other side of the break, we're going to talk to the one and only Victor Sims about how to challenge one's thoughts that lead to certain behaviors. We'll have that and a whole lot more right here, WBOK 1230 AM. What New Orleans is talking about all
Who
day
station?
long. Our station.
Yes, it is.
If you're living with dry age-related macular degeneration or dry AMD, you may be at risk for developing geographic atrophy or GA. GA can be unpredictable and progress rapidly, leading to irreversible vision loss. Now there's something you can do to
Slow it down and get it going slower.
Izervay is proven to slow GA progression.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Izervay or avacincaptad pagel is a prescription eye injection used to treat GA. Don't take it if you have an infection or active swelling in or around your eye. Izervay can cause eye infection, retinal detachment, or increased risk of wet AMD. Izervay may temporarily increase eye pressure. Your vision may be impaired after an eye injection or exam. Don't delay. Ask your doctor about Izervay today.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Visit Izervay.com. That's IZERVAY.com.
The National World War II Museum, located in the Warehouse District of New Orleans. The National World War II Museum tells the story of America's experience in the war that changed the world, why it was fought, how it was won, and what it means today. Visit them online at www.nationalww2museum.org for time tickets and safety information.
The New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation is the nonprofit organization that owns the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival presented by Shell. With the funds generated from Jazz Fest, the foundation invests in Louisiana communities through economic development, cultural enrichment, and free educational programs. To learn more about the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation, please visit us at www.jazzandheritage.org.
WBOK 1230 AM New Orleans. Home of the Good Morning Show, 7 to 9 a.m. weekdays.
This news report is brought to you by New Schools for New Orleans.
I'm Bree Wood with the 4 things you should know with BIN News. In a final report released on Monday, Special Counsel David Weiss criticized President Biden for calling Hunter Biden's prosecution a miscarriage of justice. Weiss said such comments undermine public confidence in the justice system. Biden was charged with tax and gun crimes before he was pardoned. The Biden administration is forgiving student loans for over 150,000 borrowers, bringing the total impacted to over 5 million. This includes those defrauded by schools, those with disabilities, and public service employees. A new study estimates the risk of developing dementia at around 42% for both men and women, higher than previously thought. Longer lifespans are a major factor, and the risk may be even higher for Black Americans. And the Oscar nominations announcement is delayed once again to January 23rd due to Southern California wildfires. The Oscars are still set for March 2nd. I'm Bree Wood on the Black Information Network, your home for Black News First.
New Schools for New Orleans wants to send a special shout out to our partner, the All-State Sugar Bowl. During the holiday break, over 30 teachers had the opportunity to ride in the New Year's Eve parade, and boy, did they have a blast. In addition, we had over 60 teachers attend the All-State Sugar Bowl game. Out of the 60, 11 teachers received a $1,000 gift card to purchase needed supplies to enhance the learning experiences for their students. Thank you, All-State Sugar Bowl, for your commitment to NOLA's teachers.
Good morning, Wake Up.
The Good Morning Show.
Good morning.
On WBOK 1230 AM.
we are back. Welcome back to the Good Morning Show. It's 2 minutes past the top of the hour, and we want to thank our previous guest, Dr. Ferdinand, for joining us. I am your host, Dr. Ashanta White. Hey, OT, you still there with us?
Oh, absolutely.
Listen, guess who we have in studio this morning? The one and only Victor Sims. And he and I were talking off air about behaviors. And I told him, I was like, I know I can ask you the standard questions all day, but I want to put the questions into a picture of real life news that is happening. Oliver, I'm sure you're aware, and shout out to Gary Chambers as well for talking about this on his platform. But if you're not aware and you're just tuning in and listening, Kyren Lacy, the superstar football player for LSU, is facing a negligent homicide charge for a vehicular incident that ended the life of a person. And they're talking about, well, Gary Chambers is talking about Kyren Lacy's situation juxtaposed to two white boys in 2022 and 2023, respectively. They were both involved in similar incidents where people died because they were either drinking under the influence or they hit the person, but both of them left the scene. They hit the person, killed him, and left the scene. Neither of those guys faced any jail time. They actually paid a fine and did 200 hours of community service in one of the cases. But the takeaway is that one of them is the son of a former NFL player. His name is Walter Brister, and the other guy is Jacob Naz. He also pleaded guilty to a charge of hit and run driving. Victim suffers serious injury and a death in mid-October, but he did not go to jail. He had supervised probation, and he paid $5,000 in restitution and did 200 hours of community service. But the question is, we're talking about behaviors. Mm-hmm. I was expressing to Victor Sims here that prior to this incident, Kyren Lacy was doing a whole lot of in-game behavior that folks were trying to warn him against. And it seemed innocent on its surface, but he was doing celebrations that are now banned by the NFL in terms of showing like a gun celebration, raising his shirt up, pretending that there's a weapon there, like pretending to shoot at the person who he made the play against. And there was this huge push on social media about trying to get him to scale back on that sort of representation of himself, of the institution that he plays for. And there was a lot of pushback from people saying, let that kid be a kid. He's just enjoying himself. And now we're here.
Yeah.
How do you feel that his on-field behaviors played into his current state and the charges he's facing?
Okay.
Well, Victor Sims, before you start, let me.
Yes, sir.
And I always tell people it's ironic, and I've said earlier, it's about the blessings of the energy and the topics and how Dr. White and I deal with them. Yesterday, I was engaged in a very important, emotional conversation with a very close friend of Kyren's mom. The family is now really concerned about him, but also his future, and how those antics and how those things that are perceived about him will not only deal with his future as he's one of the top wide receivers in the country, but also how the criminal justice system will perceive him. Allegedly, based on my conversation with the family, I'm not disclosing names right now, and they called me because I have this reputation with people with kids or others. They'll call me because I've dealt with stuff in my life, and how do you deal with it, right? And how do you become better or stronger, and how do you work through it? Those of us who've been through stuff, we try to offer our lives so we can help others, those good and those bad examples. Well, the family is concerned just about that, Dr. White, about is there judgment already on him because of those maybe silly or those things that he did during the games that people on social media talked about that's now banned from celebration. And will that affect him both as a professional athlete and both as a person who's looking to deal with, who is not right now in the grasp of the criminal justice system. So I just wanted to set the table there and be transparent. I am in conversation with people very close to his family, and they are extremely concerned now about the fact that there may already be judgment and his life may already be in jeopardy, especially professionally moving forward.
And I want to say this too, Victor,
Mm-hmm.
before you give your input, Oliver. I want to be very clear here in what I'm saying. The attorney who represented one of these young men said, there's no sense in sending this young man to jail. He has a promising future. Nothing good will come from putting him in prison. So I hope that same sentiment is extended to Kyron and his family, because he does have a very bright future ahead of him. And the lawyer went on to say that this was just an incident and it shouldn't, cover the entirety of his life. And what I'm grateful for is that these two incidents are precedent for what is to come for Kyron, as he faces the same charges. I think the steeper charges, to be honest with you, but the same factors, right?
Okay.
And I'm hoping and I'm praying for a redirection, right? Because sometimes it takes something to jolt us and make us see that we are far too valuable to just give our lives away to the judicial system.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to give you the floor and as the professional to give your insight on this situation.
Very complicated issue with a lot of different variables that are associated with it. Previous precedent also plays a role, which we were talking about. The other two young men who were involved in similar instances and the consequences they receive, whatever those consequences were. So it will, from looking at it from a position of what we identify as fairness and equality, it would appear that the same type of consequences should be given to the new young man who just got involved in the situation. And one of the things we have to be cautious about, what we're going to talk about this morning, is how emotional issues get involved into effective thinking and decision making. And that's one thing we have to be concerned about. How much emotion is involved? And we've mentioned that people have actually died. So there are a great deal of emotion, especially in the families of those who have lost loved ones and who are looking for some form of justice to take place. The criminal justice system supposedly does not have that level of emotion. Therefore, they come up with the comment that justice is blind. Unfortunately, individuals make the decisions. Judges, lawyers, prosecutors make the decisions. And they are human beings, and they are having emotional situations. They also have public ties. And if you are aware of a particular individual and you are a public official, you may have a greater emotional attachment to leaning toward that person. And this could be a potentially unconscious type of behavior that takes place. So the person really needs, the individual makes these type of decisions, really need to have other people assisting them and making these unbiased decisions that they may think is appropriate based upon all the elements that they may personally know about this case. And as far as his behavior on the field, what has transpired, if his driving was a violation of rules and laws, and looking at it strictly from that perspective, the behavior on the field that was governed to be violations of rules and laws, we can see some form of connection there. If we as human beings are not held responsible for inappropriate behaviors, we tend to exacerbate that behavior. We don't stop at one level. We tend to go to the next level, then to the next level, then to the next level. An individual who can commit cold-blooded murder didn't start out as a cold-blooded murderer. Yeah. They might have started out stealing a pencil and not receiving appropriate consequences for that, and then gradually escalate the behavior. So if we're looking at his behavior that generated the loss as a violation of rules, when he was on the field, was he also violating rules, and how was that met? If it was not met with appropriate consequences, that human being to feel as though what I do is okay, I can go beyond what the boundaries are because of who I am and the fact that I don't receive consequences. Yes, we can definitely tie in the behavior on the field to the behavior in the car, based upon the lack of consequences for inappropriate behavior that was determined by written laws and written rules.
Well, I also want
Now, Victor, allegedly from the friend of the mother, the family friend, he was not intoxicated. He panicked and he left the scene.
Well, that's what I want to be clear about too, OT. The article also says, the way the article is written, it reads like an accident. It says, according to state police, Lacey was traveling south on Louisiana Highway 20 and entered the northbound lane in an attempt to overtake other cars while in a marked no passing zone. So he didn't actually, he crossed when he shouldn't have been crossing into another lane. There was a car at the same time that stopped to avoid a crash. And then there was a different car that was traveling north, tried to swerve to avoid the stop car.
Yeah.
So they're saying that because he went into the lane when he shouldn't have crossed, it then created a domino effect of other cars trying to avoid hitting each other.
Gotcha.
And that's how the accident happened. He was not drunk and hit a person as these other two guys did. One of the guys actually was coming from an LSU game intoxicated and hit a person and fled the scene.
Yeah.
Right? I just want to be clear about the factors according to the article of what he was not under the influence. He didn't intentionally hit anybody and kill them and walk away.
Right.
Him crossing over into a lane per the article in a marked no passing zone is what created the
chain
domino
reaction.
of the
the
crash.
key phrase you said is what he shouldn't have.
Yes.
See, that's the key phrase.
Yeah, and
if you shouldn't do this, then don't do it.
Yeah.
If you don't do it, then there's no domino effect.
Yeah.
Now, the other elements of it, the comparison of the different incidents that took place, those are differentials and those specifics. One individual was intoxicated, so that's another as far as a rule violation.
No, I understand. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So the court comes. I had a conversation once with a judge, a prosecutor, and a defense attorney, all at the same table. It was a fascinating matter of fact. OT monitored the headline that particular conversation, and the one thing that they all had stated at that point in time, they have to take into consideration both sides of this incident before making a final decision on what they're going to do about it. That says that they're going to be exposed to various bits and pieces of information that the general public has no idea about. And when they make those inferences, when they get into those situations where they have to have conversation, get to know people, that is a potential influence on their decision making. So when it gets to the final decision making, what was the governing rule that made that decision? And as OT mentioned, an emotional conversation with family members and who are going to be emotional at that point in time. But when it comes down to the decision makers, reportedly, supposedly, the written law and the behaviors that are within that law make a determination of what the charge is going to be. So when the decision is made, who made the decision and what were you utilizing in order to make that decision, to make a determination on whether or not this is an equal administration of justice based upon the crime that's taken place. Remember, decision making is the end result of a thought, of an emotional reaction to that thought, then an actual behavior. So what was that initial thought in the first place? Where did that come from? What evidence do we have to back up and support what took place? And again, all these incidents, we have individuals who are going against what we have identified as appropriate behavior. The purpose of having written appropriate behavior is to prevent these type of situations from taking place. So when they do, we really have to take a back seat, slow down, and if your emotions are driving you, stop. Pay attention. Reduce that level of emotion so you can think clearly. We as human beings do not do a good job of processing information when we're in a heightened state of emotion.
What you got, OT?
No, I just, of course, Victor in his professional analysis is usually always spot on. But this particular situation, I think it's important to Dr. Wyatt is that when you talk about judging this young man, look, let me say this first. Our hearts go out to anyone who's lost life or limb in a tragedy. So I don't want anyone to think we're dismissing that. But Dr. White, there's always that word that you're always concerned about is and you said it before, fairness. What is it? Who does fairness apply to? And maybe sometimes if a group has been disparaged in thinking and actions and stereotyping, it's not really about being fair. It's about how do you rectify the harm there, and how do you deal with an unfair system, especially as it relates to certain people. So I think what we just want with this conversation is that this young man not only be treated fairly, but be given the same deference, also accountability, but the same deference that others have been given.
And I think that's why when I started the conversation, I wanted to talk about all of the optics of his on-field behaviors, because I know that they're going to bring that into the conversation and muddy the waters. But I think it's very clear that these sorts of issues have happened in that city before.
Yeah.
I again want to shout out to Gary Chambers for bringing this issue to the forefront and to juxtapose these issues so that we can see how the judicial system handled these men prior to Kyron Lacey's issue, right? Because one of the young men, it was days before he turned himself in. Days before. And the article with Kyron says that he's fully cooperating with the authorities. It didn't take days. Yeah. Right? And then one of the other cases, he doesn't even have the charge on his record. It's not even there. He was charged with a felony hit and run, and because he did the community service, because he's under whatever the deal was, that doesn't even appear there, so it doesn't hinder him moving forward. So all I'm asking for is that if that is the way that Baton Rouge handles these cases per laws and statutes, that Kyron is also given the ability to benefit from those same laws and statutes that kept these two young men from endangering the future of their careers, right?
I totally agree with
you. So that's all I'm saying, because the lawyer, what he said,
Victor.
and it stood out, OT, he said this incident should not determine the trajectory of this child's life, right? That's what he said about he's a good young man.
And we've heard that.
Yeah.
And we've heard those comments before over time. Victor, the irony here is that if you remember the panel discussion, especially on criminal justice that I facilitated, Victor, if you remember, the prosecutor was from Baton Rouge.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was actually from Baton Rouge. So that's the irony of where we are here now with this conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, and based upon the fact that it appears that there may be two levels of consequences for similar things, we're talking about some emotional situations that are taking place. The individuals who are making the decisions are being impacted by some outside factor that is altering their ability to think, because emotion will cause you to see things entirely differently.
Is that cognitive distortions?
It has the potential to be cognitive distortion. It has the potential because you might not reach that full level. But because these are educated individuals who have studied, who have been trained, but that doesn't mean they're not impacted by their emotional level. The relationships that individuals have also can alter emotional methods of looking at a particular situation. Well, this is my friend, or this is my family member, or my family know this individual. So there is a consequence to the individual making the decision if they do not take into consideration the other factors, family members, friends, relationships, into their decision making. And to say that a person will not do that, then we're not accepting that we're human.
Listen, we will continue this conversation on the other side of the break with Victor Sims, but I want to say this, and I want people to hear us when we say this. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the family of Herman Hall, the 78-year-old man who did not live through the incident that involved wide receiver Kyron Lacey from LSU. So our hearts and prayers and thoughts go out to the family of Herman Hall. But on the other side of the break, we'll have more in-depth conversations about understanding the process of behaviors with Victor Sims right here on WBOK 1230 AM.
That's right. What New Orleans is talking about.
All day long.
And proof every day is our station, baby.
Yes, indeed.
Hey, this is Steve Poston. Be sure to listen to WBOK 1230 AM every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. and Sunday evening at 5 p.m., bringing you the best Southern Soul barroom music with the Southern Soul Weekend Party Mix, hosted by me, of course. I'll be playing your favorite Southern Soul music by artists from all over the South, right here on WBOK 1230 AM or online at WBOK1230.com. The station you listen to longer. Listen to longer. Listen to longer.
Good morning and happy Tuesday. I'm Morgan Lentis with WDSU News, and here's a look at today's headlines. New Orleans police say a man known to have mental health issues is barricaded inside his home with a handgun. This happened shortly before 7 p.m. Monday near North Claiborne Avenue and Desire Street. Investigators say that man later fired 2 shots around 10 p.m. Again, he is still barricaded at this time. No injuries have been reported. Then happening today, a federal judge could rule on the fate of the NOPD's decades-long consent decree. A federal judge is considering whether that consent decree will stay in place or if the department is ready to enter a sustainment period, which is basically an exit plan from the agreement. WDSU will have a reporter in the courtroom, so stick with us throughout the day for updates. And finally, we have new details about some of the victims injured in the New Year's Day terror attack. 2 of them are Israeli citizens who were in New Orleans for the New Year. Right now, their identities and conditions are not known, but the Jewish Federation of Greater New Orleans tells us they stepped in to help the victims and their families with costs associated with their recovery. And that's a look at today's headlines. I'm Morgan Lentis with WDSU News. Have a great day.
NOLA Public Schools' main round enrollment for kindergarten through 12th grade is now open. With 73 schools available through the NOLA Public Schools Common Application Process, or NCAP, finding the right school fit for your family is easier than ever. List up to 12 choices to maximize your chances and apply by January 24th. We're all in, and we hope you are too. Apply today at enrollnolaps.com. That's enrollnolaps.com.
Hi, this is Cary Grant. Let's elevate every Tuesday through Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. as we discuss the community, the country, and the world, from politics to current events and sports. We look forward to your input and continuing the quality programming on your community station, WBOK. Join us every Tuesday through Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m. on Elevated Conversations, the Arnie and Cary Show.
I'm Howard Robertson, founder and creator of the Play Ode app. Back in the day, we used to ask, how you living? And that's still a relevant question today. Listening to good stuff helps you live well, like what you hear on the Play Ode app. ODE stands for Our Digital Entertainment, so you enjoy the best radio stations playing the best classic R&B, hip-hop, gospel, smooth jazz, news, sports, and podcasts. And new sounds are coming at you in 2025, so don't wait or hesitate. Download PLAYODE today.
Making a difference in the community. WBOK 1230 AM.
Good morning, wake up.
The Good Morning Show.
Good morning.
On WBOK 1230 AM.
And we are back. Welcome back to the Good Morning Show. Happy Tuesday, y'all. I am your host, Dr. Ashanta Wyatt. My co-host, Oliver O.T. Thomas, is joining us on the phone. And in studio right now, we have the one and only Victor Sims talking to us about techniques for challenging thought, overcoming cognitive distortions, and understanding the process and how behaviors affect our everyday lives.
Yeah.
So we were in conversation about the Kyron Lacey incident. I want to thank you for just jumping into that, because I wanted to be very clear that we do not condone accountability here.
Yeah.
We don't condone criminal behavior here.
Yes.
But what we do try to do here is make certain that we highlight inequities when we see them,
Yes.
or the expectation of an inequity when we see it.
Yeah.
And so if these cases happen that precedes Kyron's case and they're similar in nature, I'm just hoping that there's equity in terms of how we hold him accountable,
Yes.
right? Because he did do something that he has to be held accountable for, but we want to make sure that he can still have a productive life after he is
we
held
also want to
accountable
make sure
for his
that
actions.
the accountability is equal to the incident.
Equitable to the
Yeah,
incident. Yep.
It's got to be equal to it, because that's what justice is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Not based upon emotional reaction by the justice system that can be impacted by relationships. I mean, we understand, that Why would we even consider that there may be an unequal treatment of justice here? Because we have been exposed to it within our society on so many different occasions, especially when it came to a racial situation. We've been exposed. We know that that's part of the reality of the world that we live in. So to anticipate that this situation is going to be treated the same way is almost expected. And it's a shame within the society we live in. But the reality is we have seen unequitable administrations of justice based upon relationships, based upon thoughts and ideas, based upon racial discrimination. It exists. It's here. The method of addressing it is to shine a bright light on it. Shine a bright light on it, especially those individuals making the decisions. Because if they are understanding that they're going to be held accountable for their decisions at some point in time, sometimes that can have an emotional impact on them that cause them to stick to more of an equitable administration of justice. Will they upset people? Yes, they will. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, especially those individuals or supporters of the individual who is being looked at based upon their inappropriate behavior. But that's what you get. When you want that position, that's what you're going to get. So if you're a judge, if you're a prosecuting attorney, just stick to the law. Don't allow your emotions based upon relationships to impact your eventual decision.
Well, OT, we have a caller online too. Victor Sims is in studio with us. Good morning, Mel. Welcome to the Good Morning Show.
Good morning, Dr. White. Good morning, Mr. Vic. This is Melly Carl.
Good morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just want to share with y'all with the Karen Lacey thing. We got Google now, and if you Google the names of incidents like that can happen with different football players, it come in all shapes and colors, Mr. Vic, Dr. White. And to speak on the highway where the incident happened, I heard Dr. White say it Highway 20. That's between Morgan City and Shreveport, Louisiana. There's a canal on one side, and there's a railroad track on the other side.
Mel, you still talking? Because we lost you for a second.
Oh, no. I was just talking about that highway, Highway 20. That's between Morgan City and Shreveport.
So are you telling us that do incidents or accidents predominantly happen in that area, in that stretch of highway?
Exactly, because there's a canal on one side and a railroad track on the other side. There's a two-lane highway between Morgan City and Shreveport, Louisiana.
Okay, well that's good background information to have, because if accident, and here's another, we have to be very clear here, Mel, about what people listen to and pull from our station. We are not trying to excuse anything that took place. Somebody died, and we empathize with that. But what we're trying to do here is have a full picture conversation about the way justice is administered in Baton Rouge, and when the parameters of that justice kind of are equivalent in terms of an accident happening, somebody dying, somebody left the scene, and what the judicial system does for those sorts of incidents in Baton Rouge. So thank you for that piece of information, because again, if accidents are happening, then what is the culpability of our communities to make certain that if people are dying in that stretch of highway, could things have been done better? Because the article did say that there's a no passing or it has a marked no passing zone there. Yeah. So I don't know what that zone looks like, but I don't know. Mm-hmm. What you say, OT? OT? Mel, what did you say?
No, it does. It does. It does, and I agree with you all, 100%. I'm just telling you about that area because I worked up there a lot and I fish up there. So
thank you so much, but that's good background information to have. We appreciate your call. Have a good rest of your morning. Listen, I mean, it's good background information to have if that stretch of highway is already dangerous. Yeah. So we don't know what he crossed over for. Yeah. I'm not certain. Again, we just want a full picture conversation, because again, that young man is far too valuable for us to lose him to the judicial system. Should he be held accountable for whatever, the incident? Absolutely. Definitely. But we want to make certain that the accountability is appropriate. Right?
It's equitable, especially
right?
if you
and
have
we want to, especially when you have two.
you have some precedents
Yes.
that have already been set in the beginning of how to address such situations. Then that should from not being a lawyer, but I've heard lawyers often mention about precedents, and when precedents is set, you tend to stick with the precedents. So we're hoping that is the reality behind it, and not some emotional reaction to a very tragic situation that makes the decision. Because in the previous two cases, there was also tragedy that took place.
Yes.
So if we're going to utilize that as a measuring stick for this situation, we have to use it from the precedents as well.
The phone lines are lit up. I know everybody wants to have input on this conversation because it's an important one. And if you want to join the conversation, the number here is 504-582-9422. Good morning, Chris. Welcome to the Good Morning Show.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Morning.
So I get it. I think there definitely should be some accountability. My question is to you all, do you feel that this young man's antics on the field and off the field in terms of gesturing, the persona that he is portrayed on the field has had any effect on how he is viewed just as a person?
So, Chris, I don't know if OT is still with us. I'm sure he'll have some input, but I'll let Victor take the lead in terms of answering that, and then I'll give you my feedback as well. Victor, do you think his on-the-field antics are having some sort of impact on how he's being perceived according to this incident?
It depends on who's making the decision. Are there individuals who are going to utilize that? Yes, they are. Individuals who want to identify his behavior as being inappropriate on the field will tie these two things together. And is that a possibility? As I mentioned earlier, once a human being begins to move beyond the boundaries of what the law and rules say, is it possible for them to go beyond that in other areas? Yes, it is. But to make that as definitive statement, me personally, I have to do an in-depth interview with that individual to see where they were at that mind, what their thinking was, what they were about. We can make that assumption at this point in time, but in reality, it's only an assumption. An assumption, as you know, if you break it down, you know what it does to an individual. So is it a possibility? I have to say yes, it is a possibility. But is it an actual fact? But we don't quite know that until we do an in-depth interview of that person in their thoughts and ideas about that situation.
And Chris, my feedback will be this. We know that they're going to use his on-field antics to create some sort of picture about who he is as a person. We see that when they do it, we could be victims of an incident and they'll still put the worst picture that they could find of us to criminalize us in terms of what folks see. So we know that that's going to happen. The reason why this radio station and this conversation is important is it's probably because it's going to be the only one that senses his humanity in this situation and makes certain that he gets the same or equal or equivalent understanding of the judicial system in Baton Rouge that was afforded to the other two young men whose cases we also discussed here on the platform. So yes, I do believe they're going to bring it into it. Do I believe that that's the right thing to do? Absolutely not, because the two are not one does not dictate his behavior with the other one. But that, it's not for us to decide. What we should do is keep our eyes on the case and make certain that people in Baton Rouge know that folks are watching so that he can get the best outcome possible. And that's our job here.
Yeah, I agree. I think the part that I think for us as a community at large where things need to shift is in that aspect in and of itself, is the representation that you provide for yourself. That let's not leave any shadow of a doubt on and off the field, because that is how you are identified. When he's not he's identified by his last name and the number on his jersey. And as it's our job as a community to humanize him, but the rest of the society that's not their responsibility. And I think a lot of times we miss that point in the accountability conversation when we talk about our young boys, especially our athletes, because this is a 1 in a million shot that he has. He has a 1 in a million opportunity to go to the league, make millions, help other people, help his community, help his family come out of poverty, whatever his backstory is, right? We don't want to jeopardize. We're trying to get him to understand that, hey man, you can potentially be jeopardizing your opportunity that's in front of you. And I think a lot of times we allow or we give exceptions to the behavior rules because of what's in front of them. And I think from a neurological standpoint and a psychological standpoint, we have to address these things up front, even from park ball all the way through to high school, through college. This is unacceptable behavior.
I appreciate the commentary,
behavior.
Chris. When you hang up, I want you to listen because I'll respond to that. But thank you so much for calling in. We appreciate you here.
Yep.
Listen, let me be very clear, right?
Yes.
When these issues were happening with the gestures, as my friend who just texted me so appropriately put into perspective, the gestures weren't illegal at the time when he started to do them, right?
Okay.
And so let's be very clear about that. So he wasn't breaking any rule, even though it probably was inappropriate, right? And because I felt like it was inappropriate, guess what I did? I text the coach of Etna Carr High School because I went there. And I say, listen, this is about to be a thing. I want you to make certain that your boys know that this is not how we're going to conduct ourselves on the football field. We're not going to make violent gestures. We're not going to make gestures to give people in your windows into what we mean. We want to just score, hand the ref the ball, and keep it moving, right? Because when you're good at what you do, you don't even have to do all of that extra stuff. That boy has enough talent. Kyron Lacy has enough talent that he don't need any extra theatrics for you to watch and see how he razzle and dazzle on the football field. I wish that he would have not done those things. I wish that when people were trying to give him the feedback, he would have just taken it and put it into his conduct. But what I can say is when it started to be a national conversation, the behavior stopped because they started to implement rules saying this can be done. So I agree with Chris. We have to start to make certain that our children know we don't need to give them any more ammunition to put in the gun to shoot at us either, right?
Yeah.
We have to govern ourselves accordingly because we know the judicial system is not equitable to begin with for us. So why are we helping them? I agree. But there are people all around this city, all around this state that were trying to give feedback into his behavior who were not connected to him on the field, family or otherwise. I know OT is connected to the family. I'm sure there were conversations there. So we're not going to act as if there weren't people concerned about his behavior and trying to give him some positive feedback. But again, the gestures were not illegal for the sport. They probably were inappropriate to some viewers, right? Which is why the conversation started. Yeah, shouldn't have been doing it. But when the conversation became national and they started to make the rules against it, the behaviors did change. We have Ken online too. Good morning. Welcome to the Good Morning Show.
Good morning, Dr. Wyatt.
How you doing?
Good morning, Mr. Simpson.
Good morning.
Here's the bottom line. Precedent, each case is ruled on its own. Would we expect it? Yeah. But let me go back a little further. One that happened in New Orleans. Josh Gimmelstown was a tennis player at Tulane. He ran over a Tulane security guard, killed him, hit the car, and got no time. He got probation and house arrest. Now, he didn't wind up being able to participate any further in professional tennis. Now, what I do not suspect or expect that Kyron Lacy's future in football will happen. I think that's done, right? What I worry about for him is what's going to happen to him and for him going forward, and what are they going to do? Because we're not seen as full human beings in the spectrum of all things when you start talking about how justice is meted out to people of color. You know, we're not seen as human. So especially if this guy, the poor fella, the older man that got killed is white, he can pretty much, expect to be dealt with harshly. It depends on the judge. It depends on the jury that you get. It just depends on who you get. One way or another. We don't know.
Thank you, Ken. We always appreciate your commentary here, but I just want to be clear about the first statement you made. Are you saying that his future in football is done? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, it's done. That's done.
I would like to hope not, right? I would like to hope not, and I want to say too, there is power in the things that we say in terms of what we put out there. I hope not. I hope not, and I understand why you're saying it. I do, but I hope not, because again, I do not want anybody to be judged in totality for something they did at 20, 21 years old that could potentially harm him for the next 25, 30 years. I just wouldn't want that. I want him to be held accountable. Yes, I absolutely do, because this is going to show him that no matter how great you are and what you do, no matter like where you can go in the potential, we have to govern ourselves accordingly, because the system is already not designed for us to thrive in it, and we don't need to give them help to further set us back. He has to be held accountable. I understand that somebody lost his life in this incident, but I do not, and I hope for his sake, that his ability to do what he's doing to further himself is not done. I hope it's not. That is my hope, Kim. But thank you for calling in. We appreciate you as always here. Have a great morning. Listen, Josh on line 3. Good morning. Welcome to the Good Morning Show.
Good morning, Doc.
Good morning.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that caller might be right. There's a radio receiver. He was a rookie, and he killed a white woman drunk driving, and he's in jail, but he was out the league too. When someone does it first, that commissioner of the NFL, that he pretty much make that the barometer, and everything that falls below that cannot come, because they don't want to have any backlash. Like, they let Lacey in, and then he does this again. Then they're gonna be like, "Well, you knew he has potential of doing this, so why you still let him in?"
So Josh, what happens for those players who are already in the NFL and they do things that are not in compliance with behavior policies or conduct policies for the NFL?
It's all part of how it makes the league look. If it brings the league shame, they will cut you off without any hesitation. If it's something that can be overlooked, or it also is a pecking order. It's called how important you are to the league too at the time. So if Tom Brady would have done this, he may have not faced a harsher penalty as Lacey has. So it's unfair. What it is racist, it's unfair, but it is what it is. Like, Dante Stallworth was a receiver for the Saints. He hit a Mexican guy, and he was drunk, and he hit him. All he did was pay $1 million lawsuit, and he got banned from driving for the rest of his life.
I thought Dante Stallworth had a 30-day jail sentence as well. Did he not serve the 30 days?
He was also able to come back to the league.
Yes, I remember. And shout out to my brother for sending me that article. Shout out to Aaron. But yeah, I remember that incident. But again, I'm hoping for Kyron Lacey's sake, for the sake of just learning lessons and being able to bounce back from them, and this idea that people are redeemable. I hope that his future is not permanently marred by this, but we shall see. Josh, thank you so much for calling in this morning.
Football player that you got.
Absolutely.
He did turn around, so he'll be able to come back from that.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate you. Happy Tuesday. What you say, Doc?
Well, as far as the consequences being a inability to participate in this sport, that's one thing. My concern would be his ability to participate in society.
Yes.
To understand that there are rules set aside for all of us to be able to be as safe as possible. And the minimal violation of a minimal rule, if it's not received some form of appropriate consequence, that individual has the potential of feeling as though those particular rules don't matter to me. And that's where my concern comes in at. And I cannot tell you that his behavior on the field is a blueprint of his behavior later on, because there are other factors that are not being considered here. Being who I am, I deal with teenagers all the time. Teenagers' number one person that they want to impress is other teenagers. So they will engage in behavior that's consistent to their level of activity and behavior, not to the older society's thoughts about what you should or should not do. So because there was an NFL player who cost his team a big position when he came up with a gesture that looked like a gun, and it caused him. They lost a touchdown. They lost field position. They lost a great deal. So he got consequences. He got to the sideline. Trust me, he got a whole lot of earful. That is a behavior he'll never engage in again, based upon with his team, because he received appropriate consequences. But the biggest thing for me is, if this situation, it needs to be done equitably, and unfortunately, human beings make the decision. The reason why we have written laws is to try to reduce or eliminate the emotional response to those decisions. So that's what we have to focus on. What are the elements of this particular case that will make the determination on what the appropriate consequence could be for him? And if this is a situation where he can learn something from this and become a better human being, whether he plays ball or just become a better human being in general, that's the main concern. Now, from a societal concern, there should be an equitable administration of justice based upon the facts of the case. Unfortunately, again, we have individuals who are making decisions based upon their emotions, based upon relationships that generate emotion. And then we see a different consequence based upon some of these issues. But if you ever notice, whenever that type of, and I'm going to label this, inequality is located, the individual making the decision attempts to have some form of a logical progression of thought to validate and justify that decision. And then based upon the hierarchy within our society, based upon who that person is, that's the end of it. When the Supreme Court makes the decision, that's the end of it. Even though you can look at it and recognize the inequality that was based upon that, but that's the end of it based upon society. So there's a lot of different factors that play a role into any particular issue. We need to be aware of as many of those factors as possible before we make our own decision about this issue.
Well, we have to go to break to pay some bills, but on the other side of the break, we'll be in more conversation with Dr. Victor Sims. Stay with us right here, WBOK 1230 AM, what New Orleans is talking about all day long.
This is your news update for WBOK 1230 AM from WDSU. For all your news and weather, watch WDSU News, New Orleans' leader in live, local, late-breaking news. Today at noon and 4 p.m.
Much colder start, but highs only rising to the low to upper 50s. Expect partly to mostly cloudy skies. A little breezy with gusts up to 20 miles per hour out of the northeast. Tonight, partly cloudy, lows in the upper 30s to mid-40s. Back in the 50s and 60s Wednesday with a chance for afternoon showers. Better chance for rain on Saturday. From the WDSU First Warning Weather Center, I'm Raven Richard.
Are you passionate about community safety and police accountability? Tune in to The Monitor's Mic, where we talk about oversight, policing, and you. Hosted by the Office of Independent Police Monitor, we're here to shine a light on policing issues that matter, from real-time policing updates to in-depth interviews. Get the facts and stay informed. We're breaking down complex issues, highlighting community voices, and holding people behind the badge accountable. Join us for an informative hour every Friday at noon on WBOK. Your city, your police, your show. The Monitor's Mic.
Do you know what United Way can do for you and your community? Find out by listening to United Way and You every Thursday at noon on WBOK 1230. United Way continues to fight for the most vulnerable members of the community. Find out how this Thursday and every Thursday at noon.
Hello, I'm Gary Clark. Please tune in to Dr. Clark 101, The Living Classroom, which is broadcasted weekly every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. on WBOK 1230 AM on your dial. And as always, it's been a pleasure.
Hey everybody, it's Kimber White Dupree.
And it's Graylin Bryant Banks from the front porch. We're coming up next.
Good morning, Wake Up. The Good Morning Show. Good morning. On WBOK 1230 AM.
And we are back. Welcome back to the Good Morning Morning Show. If you're just joining us, we're in conversation with Victor Sims, talking all things behavior, but we also took a deep dive into the case that is mounting against Kyron Lacy, the standout wide receiver for LSU's football program. And we were talking about that in juxtaposition to two other cases involving similar charges, similar outcomes with Walter Brister and Jacob Naz, with both of them receiving no jail time, 200 plus hours of community service. One of them had to pay a fine. I think Walter had to do some talks about the impacts or the dangers of driving while intoxicated. And the irony is, I read in one of the articles that he had to go and speak to the LSU football team.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if his relationship or his proximity to his former NFL father factored into the decision. But what I do know is that is a precedent. Both of those cases are a precedent for Kyron's current case. And so I'm hoping that the judicial system has some sort of equitable outcomes for this kid. I'm hoping that his life in terms of society, existing in society, isn't over. And I'm hoping his life on the football field isn't over as well. So hopefully, things will work out so that he learns from this, and he's also accountable to this, and also too, we cannot let Mr. Herman get lost in the conversation. He's the 78-year-old man that who lost his life in the incident, and so we don't want to skip over that or to act as if that's not as important. But our thoughts and prayers go out to the family of Mr. Herman, the 78-year-old man who unfortunately died as a result of this incident. Hope so. And for our conversation and from my standpoint on it in general, because what I attempt to do is go below the surface of the behaviors to take a look at what generated them in the first place. How did any one of us get to the position where we are to face the consequences that we're facing? And from the, from what we attempt to do with that, what I attempt to educate on that is the thoughts that individual utilizes that generates the emotion that eventually leads to the behaviors. The question is where we get our thoughts from, where we get our activities from, where do we get the facts that validate the things that we think and the things that we think are appropriate and okay. And if we can fully understand where that information came from and how it impacts each one of us, if we may have a better understanding of how the emotion that generated from that guides that eventual behavior. Because after the behavior come the consequences. And Doc, I was reading, right? Because I wanted to understand the law and how they administered the law. It says, whoever commits the crime of hit and run driving when death or serious bodily injury is in a direct result of the accident, and when the driver knew or should have known that death or serious bodily injury has occurred, shall be fined not more than $5,000 or imprisoned with or without hard labor for not more than 10 years or both. So if that is the law per the Louisiana State Legislature, then how did those two situations end up with no jail time? They didn't pay thousands of dollars in fines, and then they were given community service.
As we said, the individuals who are making the decisions are impacted by emotional issues based on relationships, based upon expectations, based upon their own goals and objectives in their particular professions. And people can rationalize these activities based upon who they are and what that's about. As I mentioned, when I had this conversation with a judge, a district attorney, and a prosecuting attorney, all of them talked about taking into consideration both sides of a case. And what that tells me is they become emotionally impacted by understanding the precipitating events, the educational levels, the parental involvement of that particular perpetrator, as well as understanding the damage to the victim and the victim families, and then make a decision based upon those issues. Now, all that's supposed to be based around the law. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know exactly how they do it, but in listening to them, I understood their emotional connection to the situation that they were addressing and dealing with. And again, whenever we get emotions that are involved in a particular thing, we got to be very, very careful, because emotions do not allow us to process information effectively. And emotions will cause us to see things one way and one day and see that same thing different another day based upon the emotion that we're feeling. If I'm in a bad mood one particular day and somebody does something I feel is an infraction, I may go off. And another day, if I'm in a great mood and that individual engages in that exact same behavior, I may not have that same reaction. Even though it's the exact same inappropriate behavior, but based upon my emotional level is how I'm going to react and respond to it. And we have to take that in consideration in all major decisions. Because we can have the factual written statement, but the human involvement in it is their emotional level, their behavioral level about it, and whatever they're thinking at that point in time. And thinking, again, gets impacted by the level of emotion that we have.
So what's our takeaway, Doc? What's our takeaway? You have about two minutes. What's the takeaway in terms of, because the conversation that we're having is about the administration of justice and how, I guess, behaviors or emotions are
impacted.
How does it influences it? Because you said, it's supposed to be blind, but there's human beings.
Yeah, there's human beings making the decision.
Yeah.
So what we have to do, not just for this particular situation, but any situation you're involved in, if you find yourself emotionally charged, stop. Do not make a decision, because you're not capable at that point in time of making an effective decision and incorporating all the elements that are involved. How many times have we acted on something, found out it was a mistake, and then realized, oops, sorry, I thought you said, I thought you meant, I thought. So I'm using my ideas to identify your behavior, and that is always a mistake. Slow down. When emotions are involved, slow down. Do not make a major decision, because I can guarantee you, you will make a mistake.
How important is an accountability partner? Like when you feel like you are emotionally charged and you get ready to make a decision, how important is it for you to have someone you can call who you know can be a voice of reason?
Extremely important to have a voice to tell you, you're messing up.
Yeah.
You're making a mistake at this point in time. That's extremely important.
My friend told me I was going too far yesterday. She said, look, Doc, you're going too far. You're going too far. Because I was hot.
Then pay attention to her. Because when we get upset, we tend to make mistakes based upon our own thoughts about what other people should or should not be doing. Yeah. That is always a problem. That is always a problem. We have to calm down. And if we have the same thought after we're calm, that we're dealing with upset, then we're probably in the right place.
Well,
but usually you don't have that.
Shout out to you, because let me tell you something. You did a hard pivot for our conversation this morning. We weren't supposed to be talking about Kyron Lacy's incident with you, but I appreciate you bringing your professionalism and your expertise into this conversation. And as always, we value your input here, and you're always welcome back. You gonna come back?
I plan on it.
You gotta come co-host with me sometime too.
Sure.
Because my co-host is a busy man.
Yes, he is.
So when he's busy, you gotta come sit in the chair next to me so we can really chop it up. But listen, thank y'all for joining us this morning for our Tuesday show. Thank you to the incomparable Victor Sims. Thank you to all the listeners who called in to talk about this issue with Kyron Lacy. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the family of Mr. Herman, who lost his life in the incident. But we're hopeful that this is not going to be a deterrent for Kyron for the rest of his life. But stay with us. I welcome you to the front porch. Up next, we're Graydon and Kimber. This is WBOK 1230 AM, what New Orleans is talking about all day long.